acquaintance of Mr. Bob Roth, R-O-T-H-E. Today we will be interviewing in the Chickasha Library, and for the Oklahoma Historical Society and the Oklahoma Living Legends. The present interviewee is a housewife. She knows of the early days and on the farm, and I'm sure will give us the most interesting story of the differences between those days and these days. First, would you spell your name for us, please?
Orlina, O-R-L-I-N-A, Minette, M-I-N-N-E-T-T, Driskill, D-R-I-S-K-I-L-L.
Thank you. And now we'd like to have the names of your parents, and would you spell them both out for us? This is a help to the genealogical people that use our tape.
Father, Orlin, O-R-L-I-N, Minette, M-I-N-N-E-T-T, Mother, Mita, M-I-T-A, Brookfield, B-R-O-O-K, F-I-E-L-D, Harris, H-A-R-R-I-S, Minette, M-I-N-N-E-T-T.
Thank you. And when did they first come to Oklahoma?
My parents came in 1903 from San Antonio, Texas.
That's before statehood. You weren't with them then?
Yes.
Really? Doesn't look like it. Then we can go back then to, you'd remember Statehood Day, maybe? Would you? All right, Mr. Roth, there's a good story to begin with.
Okay, can you tell us some of the early childhood experience you had in early Oklahoma as a child?
I came to Whitebead, Oklahoma, Indian Territory, with my parents and my baby sister. I was born in 1902, my sister in 1903. We came in late 1903 and lived on a farm near Whitebead.
Where is Whitebead, approximately the location of it today?
Whitebead is 5 miles west of Pauls Valley on Highway 19. There is a church and a school still there.
Okay. Can you tell us some of your early life that you remember on the farm, some of the things that you endured and happened to you?
Well, I was quite young, of course, but I do remember statehood day. My father and grandfather participated in the voting when Oklahoma became a state in 1907. That was in November. By that time, I had 2 young brothers, one born in 1905, Henry Minette, and another brother, John, born in 1907, just a few days before statehood. Of course, I was preschool age. I only remember the good times that we lived in a log house, part log house, and everything seemed to be so abundant. Of course, that was in a child's eye, but it was a very happy time in my life.
The land that your folks settled on, was this Indian Territory, but was it opened, or how did they settle? Was it the lottery, or did they just buy the land?
No, they did not buy. We just rented. We came there because my father was in poor health and was told that the Washita River area would be a very fine place for him to recover. So 3 years my family lived there.
Did they buy land later on?
No, because my father, later our family moved to Purcell, and my father went to school in Chicago, Illinois, and became an optometrist. By 1911, we moved to Purcell, lived there briefly, and then to Chickasha in late 1911.
Did you graduate from high school in the Chickasha schools?
Yes, sir. All my schooling, with the exception of 2 years, was obtained in Chickasha.
Tell us about some of the early people that you remember on the farm and in the area?
The Kimberlin family, who were people who were allotted land in that area west of Pauls Valley, were our nearest neighbors, and I remember as a little child seeing my first Negro, and of course it shocked me so, and I cried, and it embarrassed my grandmother very much. That was my first experience with the Negroes, but Pauls Valley, of course, always had Negro families. The area was very fertile because it was the Washita River bottom, and I remember my parents and grandparents telling about what wonderful corn crops we raised. We were only on the farm 3 years before moving to...
Can you tell us some about the house on the farm?
Yes. The house, 3 rooms of the house were log, and then my father added on another room, which we thought was great because it was not log. And
what was it made of?
It was made of, well, the upright studs were made of hand-trimmed poles from down on the creek. And as I remember, the top was shingled. But now that, of course, I was too small to really remember about that. But it was, to us, a very modern room.
Were the walls plastered, or were they just...
No, they were just beaded ceiling, little tiny boards that fit together. And we had a fruit cellar that was so large and so good because in those days you preserved everything or you didn't have anything. And our gardens were abundant. I didn't know about it at the time, but my parents tell how wonderful it was to have everything canned or preserved or dried. Lots of dried fruit we had.
You stayed here. The house was added on to later by Mr. Fitzpatrick. Can you tell us something about him?
Now that goes to my house down here.
Oh, okay.
We've been talking about the White Bead area.
Yes. Can you tell us something about living on the farm and the people and the Indians that were in the territory? Were these Indians hostile, or?
There were no teepee Indians in the White Bead area. The Indians who lived there were either a full-blood Indian woman who would marry a white man, or vice versa. Their children would be very nice, agreeable children. They played well with us. They were very calm children, and the men usually drank a lot. They had a weakness for hard liquor, but it didn't seem to bother their home life at all. They schooled their children with us. That is, all children of school age went to school because I think it was a law that they do send their children to school.
You mentioned a Ben Finney here and his family. Can you tell us something about?
Now that's where I live now.
Is that where you? Okay. Can you tell us something about your present home, then, Mrs. Driskill?
In 1938, my father, Dr. Manette, bought this farm that I live on, and it was previously owned by Mr. Ben Freeney.
How do you spell his name?
Freeney. He came to that area in just before the turn of the century, 1899. He was married to Eria Gage, who had one little daughter.
Is her name G-A-G-E?
Yes, G-A-G-E. She had one little daughter by a previous marriage. Then they had 8 children, 4 of whom were old enough to have allotments, plus the allotment that Mr. and Mrs. Freeney had. And they were allotted this land right around this farm that I'm living on. All the land joined. They had a lovely farm. It went all the way to the Washita River.
Can you tell us some of the landmarks that you remember?
Yes, the landmarks are, I regret so much that we didn't know about the earlier history of the home, especially before Mr. Freeney had it. I know some of it because I am a friend of a granddaughter. And the wagon ruts are still visible in places. A new highway has gone through the farm and obliterated some of the marks, but we still know where the old wagon trains and the cattle roads were, plus freight wagons would go across, and they had a rock crossing at our creek west of the home. Mrs. Freeney was a very dear little lady, and she told me of so many incidents, like each 4th of July there would be a picnic, and it would last 2 or 3 days, and usually there was a killing before it was over. They were very rough in those days. And the little cemetery, which we call the Alex Cemetery now, is near my home, and that is where one of the Fitzpatricks, a previous owner of the farm, is now buried because he was killed in a fracas on July the 4th, 1902. His monument is in the Alex Cemetery.
Can you tell us something about your move to Chickasha and some of the early times in Chickasha?
Yes, we came by, we shipped our furniture as close as Purcell and White Bead were to our family home. We shipped or my parents shipped the furniture by train, and as I remember, it was days getting to Chickasha, but we came in a surrey drawn by 2 horses. That was in 1911. And we met on the road one automobile that scared our team, and we almost had a runaway. But that added to the delight of all of us. And I started my schooling in Chickasha in the fall of 1911. By that time, my father had finished his training as an optometrist, and for years he followed that profession.
How long did he practice in Chickasha?
From 1911 till 1953, my father was an optometrist in Chickasha.
How were the early supplies moved into Chickasha and the surrounding territories?
Well, by the time I was old enough to know about things, trains were adequate, and very few things were freighted by team. I think by that time, 1911, everything in Chickasha was purchased by rail shipment. Mm-hmm.
Where were these shipments from? Do you recall, or most of them from?
Oh, now, when the Freeneys lived on their farm prior to our going there, and the Fitzpatrick family prior to that, everything was freighted from either Gainesville, Texas, or Denison, Texas. And I'm told that the lumber for the old home that was added onto was, well, in fact, I have nails from that part of the building, and they are the square nails. Even our shingle nails were square nails.
A minute here. Mrs. Driskill, can you tell us something about Mr. Fitzpatrick and maybe some of the highlights of his life or some of the things that he did in helping build the old house?
Mr. Fitzpatrick would be what we call a squatter. He came into the area, I know not what year, but he was the one who added on to the old 5-room log house that was there when he came. He was a stonemason, and he built 2 lovely fireplaces in my home, which are still functional. And he helped build the stockade at Fort Sill and a bank at Rush Springs, plus other fireplaces in the community. He reared a family of 8 children and built 2 very nice homes for children of his on this place because he farmed 1,500 acres. In that day and time, you didn't have to own it. You just moved on it, improved it, and claimed certain areas. But when Mr. Freeney married in...
I believe we got Mr. Fitzpatrick's name earlier, but would you spell that for us? I believe we have it earlier, but let's be sure we have it.
We're talking about Mr. Jim Fitzpatrick, Fitzpatrick.
And then you just mentioned Mr. Ben Freeney.
Freeney.
How you spell that?
Mr. Ben Freeney, Frwney. Mr. Freeney was of Indian birth, and he, with his wife, moved there when they had 2 little children in 1899 because he could claim Indian right and be allotted land. All right, he had 4 children who qualified under the Oklahoma laws to have allotted land, plus he and his wife each had allotments. They lived there 39 years, and in 1938 my father bought the farm, and I have lived there since.
Ms. Driskill, can you tell us some of the early dress and some of the things that happened or that were in style at the time that you first came to Chickasha?
I'll never forget, and I was quite small, I'll never forget how my mother was dressed the day that we left Paul's Valley to move to Purcell, where we lived briefly, and then on to Chickasha. My mother had a baby in arms and then 3 small children, just in stair-step ages. She had on a beautiful white linen skirt and a blouse and a hat. The train was late because of flooded areas. The track was underwater part of the way. And by the time we reached Purcell, which was a very short distance, she looked like a shambles, I'll tell you, with 4 little crying children and hungry probably. And we were not well-to-do people, and we had to make do with what we had. I don't remember wearing sack dresses because I don't think we had sacks then. I don't know about that. But we had one Sunday dress, and we were lucky to have that. But we were happy, and we thrived, and I had a happy childhood.
Could you tell us anything about the toys that you played with? The toys, you know, when you were a kid, dolls.
You made her own.
Did you?
You want to ask me?
Yes, go ahead. Can you tell us some of your early playthings that you had in early Oklahoma?
We, in the wintertime, if we had ice and snow, my father would tie a rope on the end of a corn scoop and drag us up to the top of the hill, and then we would coast down. That was a sled. And if we had old broken dishes, we made toy houses, and we got grape leaves and made hats, and we'd play all day in the shade of a tree, make sand houses, quite unlike children of today. We didn't have bicycles nor skates. That came later, and after we were old enough to maybe earn a few dimes and buy our own. But we were very happy children.
Do you remember about the first televisions? Do you remember when
Well,
you
you
saw
see,
the
honey,
first television?
that wasn't too long ago. That was 20 years ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that your father was a doctor of optometrist. Did he take his training after the family was raised or before?
My father, under great odds, went to school in Chicago. We were all baby children or small children. The years were probably 8, 9, and 10, because I know he finished his schooling just in time to join us after we had moved to Chickasha. And I say that because I remember my grandparents helping us through those days, both by travel and financial aid.
How long was he in Chicago, do you recall?
It took 3 years to get his training then, which is a very small time according to the optometrists of today.
Did your mother work during this time that he was away, or?
My mother had no time to work. She was saddled with 4 little children, and she was a good mother and preserved and took care of everything at home. And it was hard, but we didn't know any different.
Karen, do you have any more questions?
No, that's, well, tell us something about the food. Anything about, you know,
We
how y'all- what
we
you
had
used to-
wonderful food.
Did you have beans or something?
Oh.
What did you?
Can you tell us about the early food that you had as you came to Oklahoma?
Well, we had abundant gardens, always. I don't know why, but maybe we had more rain than we do now. But my grandparents and my mother preserved everything. We always ate well, very well.
And you raised a good deal of your own food. didn't
We
you?
raised all of our food except maybe our flour and our sugar and coffee. We went to the store very seldom. Back in those days, if you got 20 cents a bushel for corn, that was considered a good price.
Mrs. Driskill, this concludes our interview for today. I'm Bob Roth with the Living Legend Group out of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and we've interviewed Mrs. Orlina Driskill today in Chickasha, May the 20th, 1976. Thank you.
There were others who came in later, and in their, what would I call it? Undergraduate, I suppose I would call it. That department, they had a number of blacks who were taking music, and I had the privilege of teaching some of those children, you know, that they had coming to their preparatory school. That's what I think I
Did you
would call
expect
it.
to teach then?
No, I had wanted to become a great concert pianist.
Yeah, it's a dream of
I had heard Nellie Nay,
Yeah.
and I had hoped that one day I would be that great pianist. But I did not realize the price that one must pay before you attain that status. So, after I finished, I found that I had to get a job. So, I had to go back, take all of these teaching aids, these teaching subjects,
Education.
yes,
Methods and-
subjects in education.
Yeah, methods
And
and
so I
programming and
have that. I have no regrets though, because I feel that that was very necessary if you're going to teach. And so I went to the University of Kansas for my methods, for all of those
Educational.
teaching, educational subjects that I
And you were
needed.
certificated in Kansas or in Oklahoma?
Well, in Kansas and Oklahoma, but I was
Kansas
I-
first.
Yes,
Mhm.
but I started teaching in Oklahoma, and then I was certified here.
What was the first school you taught in?
Chickasha. No, let me go back. I had won a scholarship to Chicago Musical. I met the president of a school in Memphis, Tennessee. he wanted that I should go there and work in the music department. And I had decided to go. I came home, went there, and stayed 3 weeks. My father had a serious accident. I was called home. In the meantime, a job near home came up in Chandler that paid more. I was close to home where I could come and see my father. And I got released. Took that job in Chandler. This is all in 1 year. I was there for the second, until the second semester. I was very, very unhappy. I will not call the name of the person who was the principal. But all of those things go to make up a life, one's life.
Do you recall what your first salary was?
My first salary was $125 because I had to take charge of the band. Can you
That's
imagine?
what year was this now?
That was in 30.
1930.
Because
And 125.
Yes,
Yeah.
125.
You were coming up.
But yes, but you see, ordinarily I would have gotten about $75. But you see, I was going to start that band. And at the end of the semester, they needed a music teacher. That was here in Chickasha. So, the end of the first semester, I came to Chickasha. I've been here ever since.
Rest here a minute. Schooling in Chickasha and some of the people that were involved in your schooling and in the school system.
I'll be happy to, because I feel that the East Side community has produced some fine people. During the 1940s, Ada Lois Fisher began the process that eventually ended segregation at all educational levels in Oklahoma.
She entered the Oklahoma University, if I recall, right?
Yes, she did. Now, Dr. Fisher is at present the professor and head of the History and Human Relations Department at Langston University.
And was she from Chickasha originally?
Yes, she is originally from Chickasha. Her mother and father lived here with their family. Her father was the minister at the Church of the Living God. Another that I should like to mention is Dr. William Sims, who's
Would you spell his name, please?
William, William, Sims, Sims. He was the first graduate from Lincoln School who became president of a college.
Lincoln High School in Chickasha was the black high school?
Yes, Lincoln High School in Chickasha was a black high school. Thomas McAvin, who lives here now, was the first black to earn a law degree from this community. We have a few others, but as I recall now, another one was Herman McKinney.
You want to spell his name for us, too?
Herman, Herman, MC, capital, Kinney. We have some other firsts that I would like to mention.
Yes, we would like to hear them.
Yes, Mrs. Lizzie Stevenson, who was reared in this community is the first black teacher who received the distinction of being the Teacher of the Year. And that was in, I believe, 1971 or 2.
Could you spell her name for us?
Mrs. Lizzievenson. She is married to Harold Stevenson. Now, Eva L. Boyd was the first black teacher to serve as president of the Chickasha Classroom Teachers.
And that's you, right?
Yes, that's me. I don't know whether, it's not all,
Yes,
but I'm the one. The last high school class to finish from Lincoln was in 1959 under the principalship of, I believe, E.T. Busby. I believe that's
B-U-Z-B-Y?
B-U-S-B-Y, Busby. Now, did you know that at one time this little community afforded 3 medical doctors at the same time?
No, I didn't.
Well, we did. They were Doctors Bullock,
Can you spell that for us?
Bullock, Thompson, Thompson, and Bennett. They all 3 worked here at the same time. Another first that we were happy about is Mrs. Johnnie Pearl Coffey, JohnniePearlCoffey. She was the first black to serve this community as a social worker, I believe they call them now. Then they said welfare caseworkers. I believe that's what they
She
call
worked for the state welfare department?
Yes, she was the very first. The first graduate, and we are happy to think of her because she was very good community worker. Mrs. Luella Richards, Luella-Richards. She was the first graduate of the Lincoln High School. We also have another first here that we're proud of. Rose Brown is the first black member of the City Council, and she is at present serving. Malcolm Hilburn has done a tremendous job.
Can you spell his name for us?
Malcalm, who is doing a tremendous job. At present is the first black principal of an integrated junior high school here in Chickasha.
How many junior high schools are there in Chickasha?
Only one.
One.
And he is the principal of that.
How is the Lincoln School being used now?
The Lincoln School is being used as a 4th grade center. I want to say this, too. Many parents of this community have made great sacrifices that their children may develop and serve the community in a positive way. You know, we have so many negatives,
Yes.
but we want the positive things. Some are yet residents of Chickasha, and their children have gone to various places in the States. They are serving as social workers, ministers, teachers, CPAs, doctors, lawyers, nurses, and just plain honest, working citizens.
Well, it certainly sounds that Chickasha has contributed many well-known blacks, and people have been worthy of their names.
Well, I want to tell you about one family now. That is Robert and Savannah McKinney, Robert and Savannah, Savannah, McKinney, Mckinney. They are very hard-working, earnest citizens. I think that they have the largest number of persons in their family who have graduated, most children from college, and they are now gainfully employed. They have 9 children. One is at present a junior at USAO, and of course they have
What is USAO?
University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma, located in Chickasha. The other one, who did not finish, has a handicap, but she went to college for a year and a semester. But I would like to mention these other children.
Yes.
Oldest ones is named Raymond. He is a teacher.
Now, these are all McKinneys, right?
Yes, all McKinneys. The next one is Herman. He is a lawyer. The next one is Lafayette. He's a CPA. The next one is Margaret. She's a teacher. Evelyn, I mentioned her. She had 1.5 years of college, but she is a handicap. The other one is Robert. All of these are McKinneys. The next one is Herbert, who is a recreational director. Cheryl is a teacher. I don't know whether she's in Montana, one of the far western states. And of course, Karen is the baby. She is a junior at USAO. I think that this family has contributed.
It sounds like they've certainly contributed to Chickasha and the country as a whole, and
yes.
certainly has some successful
Now
children.
They are children. One works in Oklahoma City, this recreational director. They work in Minnesota, California. I think the most of them, 3 of them in California. We have, I know, I'm trying to think of the PhDs that we have, but I don't have that figure accurate enough. Of course, Dr. Sims.
I was going to ask you about Dr. Sims. Now, he was president at Langston
yes,
for
he was
one time, wasn't
president
he?
at Langston for one while. He married a girl who was a member of a pioneer family here. They came before statehood, the Crowells.
You want to spell that for us?
Crowell, Crowell. Another person who's doing an outstanding job, I think, he is at the University of Illinois, is Willard Maytubby, Maytubby. We also have another family who I'm happy to say is a neighbor of mine, and how he used to worry me blowing his horn. In the morning, he would get up early and practice, is Dr. Curtis King.
That K-I-N-G?
Yes. He is the head of the instrumental and vocal department at Florida, a college in Florida. I don't recall whether it's Florida. I believe it's Florida A&M. I'm not definitely sure. But now,
Can you give us some of the conversations you've had with early settlers in the Chickasha?
I would like to mention the many conversations that I had with a wrangler by the name of Organ. I can't think of his first name, but it's O-R-G-A-N, you spell his name. And he had driven cattle from the Mexican border up into the Dakotas.
Was he a black person?
He was a black. He also worked as a cook. And what was most amusing was the songs that he could remember. And he would always oblige you with singing them.
Can you remember some of the songs?
No, I don't. I don't remember. One or two of the songs I took down, but I didn't do the
Where'd you
thing.
become acquainted with Mr. Organ?
Here in Chickasha. He used to pass where I lived, the house where I lived, and he would stop and talk with us about his early days, the things that he did in Texas while driving these herds. He was one of the early persons who were from Chickasha to drive cattle on the Chisholm Trail, because he drove cattle from Texas to Kansas, Abilene.
The Chisholm Trail passes right through or close to Chickasha,
Close
doesn't
to
it?
Chickasha, passes close to Chickasha. I would like to mention the last principal, because he's a wonderful person.
Okay.
W.H. George is living here in Chickasha now.
How do you spell his name?
George. There are so many things to remember.
Can you tell us some more about Organ and some of the things that he encountered on the cattle drives?
Well, naturally, rustlers. They encountered rustlers, and how many they had fought off, and he had notches on his gun for the ones that he had killed that came next to the chuck wagon, I believe we would call it, and many of them were vicious. Some of the cowboys, wranglers or cooks or what have you, were killed on these drives. Sometimes he said the cattle were stampeded, and the cowboys were killed in that manner. And he showed a wound on his leg where he was, the wagon, the rustlers came, and his cook wagon turned over, and he lay for a number of hours under this wagon with his leg pinned. And of course, the most of the meats that they ate were beef, and he said that they complained sometimes about his food, but he said he was a pretty good cook. And I guess he was, because he said he liked it. But he liked most cooking. What was that he said? It was an Indian dish, sake, I believe.
Sake, I think,
Yes,
is an Indian dish.
I believe he called it. He liked that. He said he was a very good sake cooker.
I think it's made from corn.
Yes, it's made from corn. And he was going to cook some for us, but he passed on.
Is there anything else that you can think of? I think we're about ready to conclude our interview here, Mrs. Boyd. Is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to tell us at this time?
I don't think, at present, I don't think so, but I would like to pay a tribute to the people of this community who have done a fine job.
It certainly sounds like
And
the black
contributing.
people have contributed greatly to the Chickasha community.
Yes.
And had some outstanding people go through their schools.
I would like to mention that the people of the community are working on a community center, and that is dedicated to one of the doctors that I mentioned. It's called the W.A.J. Bullock Center, and that is a part of the home. They have made an addition. That is a part of the home that he lived in, and they have named that in honor.
Are any of these three doctors still practicing in Chickasha?
They have all three passed on.
Ms. Boyd, I think that concludes our interview for today. This is Bob Roth of the Living Legend Group of the Division of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and thank you very much.